So I think it's that shifting of vigilance of self that I came into that awareness of, wow, it's not the world that's doing me harm. It's the stories that I'm connected to about myself and how I go out in the world. I am my
Yeah.
greatest enemy. This is the Knocking Doors Down podcast. I'm your host, Jason LaChance, and here we unlock stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation. Hey, please hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're on. And while you're at it, why not leave a rating, a review, or a thumb up on YouTube and a comment in the video. This is the Knocking Doors Down podcast. We're doing some fun today. Yeah, I'm going to start off cursing. Got my dear friend, the beautiful Michelle Curiel, of course, of the Sobriety Playbook. Gary Menkes, my brother from the Begin Again podcast. And hey, it's just sober people wanting to have some fun conversation here.
Absolutely. So glad that you've invited me back onto the show, and I'm so pleasure to meet Gary as well.
Same here, Michelle. I am grateful when your idea came out, and I was grateful that you included me. I was like, yeah, I can't wait to do this with this group.
Oh, for sure.
Well, I figured the people that I always go, hey, we're going to do this again really soon. And, you two I frequently converse with. So it's like, hey, I was actually joking about that. One of the beautiful gifts of recovery. I met so many amazing people. My budget just can't afford me to go to Texas and all the way to New York
Right.
yet to visit and get, spend some time. But hey, we got this technology, so why not embrace it?
Amen.
Absolutely.
I think it's the one thing I say, maybe, more than anything. And I almost tried not to, but it just, I'm overwhelmed. Like the people we meet in this Recover Out Loud, the people I've met in the podcast, they're just really so special. And I think I said last when I had you and Flint on, is Flint kind of gave me the permission to say, hey, man, the best people I've met are in recovery. And I was like, I think that too. He's like, why? Because we're all kind of a bunch of, paraphrasing, like we're all phoenixes. We all been through this. He said, so I'm going to say it. And we came back, we rose up from it. I'm like, amen. And he's so right. And, then I go to a meeting and I said it this morning at my Friday morning meeting, I'm like, surrounded by a bunch of awesome people because we've all been through it. And it's really, it's such a pleasure. It's such a gift. It really is. I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah. It truly is. I was listening to Gary's podcast with you and Flint on it earlier, Jason, and I was just thinking, man, I can't agree with Flint more, because it doesn't matter where I go to, anything that has to do with recovery, sobriety, a 12-step meeting, a rehab, or anything like that. It's like, those are my people. Like, I can connect with those people on a level that I don't have the ability to do so with others, and it has to do with like our authenticity, our honesty, the fact that we're not afraid to put it all out there, because so many people in the world put on this front like everything's okay, and we're like, no, it's not okay, but this is how I made it better.
Yeah. Well, and I guess some of us have done some just like, I don't know about I was talking, unfortunately we were going to have Mike Diamond join us, but passing of a loved one, so he couldn't make it, but and we're keeping that individual and their loved ones in our prayers. But we were joking about like some of the stuff that we did. And it's like, oh my God, like, can you even connect to that? It's like, no, like I can't connect to the things I did, but I know I did them. And it's that we can laugh about that. Like, really just like, Michelle, I know you stayed in trap houses, Gary, it's like, how much booze and blow can I do? It's like, oh my God. And now we're in this place. I mean, I think we're a combined of over 40 years of sobriety between the three of us. And it's like, I don't even know who that person was.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
it's amazing. My nieces say, like, because they've heard, we'd sit around sometimes and just tell like ridiculous, outrageous Gary stories, not the real dark ones, but just like the off the wall stories. And they look at me like, I can't even like picture you being that person anymore. Like, and because they've never seen me in that, I've been, I've been sober 18 years. They've never seen me that way. And, it's, we've done some crazy things. And again, this morning, there was a guy, he had like four years sober today. And he had such a down to earth, awesome perspective on life that he gained in sobriety. And kind of going off of what you said, Michelle, like, those are my people. And I'm like, dude, like, you just got it. Like, you changed your life. We're all a bunch of our lives are complete 180s from where we were. and you get these gifts in sobriety. And, I think, that's kind of what the podcast is about, right? It's like, hey man, I remember early on, and I mentioned this before too, reading my girlfriend at the time, and she's my wife now, Michelle. She gave me a book called Courage to Change. And, it was about these celebrities or CEOs that are sober and living a sober life. And it opened my eyes. Like that helped me, it helped me early on. Then walking around New York City and seeing celebrities sitting right next to them, like, man, look at these guys are thriving in their life and they're sober. Like, maybe I can too. And, that's sort of where it came from. I think more people can be served to hear some of these comeback stories that you're not alone. You don't have to live that way anymore.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Well, and I think the things that we do and so many other people in that recovering out loud and saying F the stigma, I don't care, think of me what you will, like you can't judge me as much as I judge myself. Like nobody can beat me up as much as I did, so have at it. I mean, seriously, go to town, say what you want to say. You're doing me a favor of where I know you have a place in my life, which is not at all. And I think it's the thing that I didn't get when I first started doing knocking doors down. And I definitely don't encourage slip ups, relapses, whatever you want to call what I had. But it opened my eyes to that fact of like, wow, wait a minute. This is about giving other people courage to simply that permission, not so much courage, but the permission that, oh, wow, so many people just it started with help and like asking a singular person in most cases, help, a higher power. I know, Gary, you and I are Christians. Michelle, I know you said that Jesus Christ is your favorite of the deities.
Ascended masters. Yeah,
that's it. And I think it's that beautiful thing that it's so many other people. We walk into the room and the one thing we may not resonate with anyone if we go to a recovery meeting, but the fact of the matter is every single person said, I need help.
Mm-hmm. It takes so much courage. And even if it's just like a tiny bit of humility, that mustard seed of humility, it takes a lot for someone to say, I can't do this anymore. And so whenever someone says that, it's like it says in the rooms, it's like, it's my responsibility to be able to be there for them. Whether that's, to sponsor them, and not even that necessarily, but just to share my experience, my strength, my hope, with honesty, and complete, without a filter. There's so many ways to do service work, but it's like we have to be willing to share everything and put it on the floor and be willing to be ridiculed or judged or looked at sideways, or people talk about you behind your back or whatever that is. It's okay. It's an opportunity for compassion when that type of thing happens.
I love that. As you guys are both talking, it's kind of dawning on me that, this life in sobriety has been like just like a ton of epiphanies, of different epiphanies, and courage, to ask for help. Michelle, those are the exact words I said, actually, is, and I'm sure all three of us said, I just can't do this anymore, and I don't exactly know what happened that night and, 18 plus years ago, but, I asked for help. And, growing up, Jason, I know we've talked about this in the past too, like growing up the way, like you don't say anything, you don't share your feelings. You don't tell anyone how you man up and, whatever. It's
put some dirt on it, Gary.
I still do rub the dirt on. I get in trouble. My kids rub some dirt on it. You'd be okay. Asking for help, is the most courageous thing that you can do. Like hands down, it is the most courageous thing that you can do. I feel like everything that I was raised on or taught or my entire life is completely wrong. And it's given me like this angle, like, you know what, Gary, you don't know anything, like you don't know anything. Like you need to have an open mind about stuff. Like just because this is how your tunnel vision was raised, like there's different ways of handling things, but the courage to ask for help, like you guys are saying, is, I think it's the most courageous thing that someone can do for themselves. And you were touching upon Michelle, and we touched upon like stigma. And I was reading, the email, Jason, that you put out, some of maybe the things we had talked about. And I remember early on, like, what are you going to do? If someone, especially like my first year, like, what do you say if someone asks, like, why aren't you drinking? Why, if they're staring at you, right? When we're early on, like, you feel like the whole place is staring at you, like, oh my God, who's the loser in the corner? What's the matter with him? And, especially if you're a real alcoholic, like that just, it just takes over, right? And there was a guy in my firm, a Wall Street firm, and he was really high up. And someone said, go talk to him. He's been sober for a while. And he said, listen, and he gave me and I still, I've been coming around a little bit, so I don't have to use those lines, but I use this line so easy because it fit me perfect. It's like if someone asked you, like, hey, do you want a drink? You just say, yeah, all right, I'll have a drink. But first of all, get me a divorce attorney and get me another attorney because I'm going to get arrested. I'm not going to make it home tomorrow, and I'm going to be in jail tomorrow. So I was like, perfect. So it's just like you get in front of it, like you get in front of that, like, I guess the stigma. And usually if you say that to like a normal person, they're like, probably not going to talk to you for the rest of the night, but that's okay. They're also not going to bother you either. So I don't know. I thought about that in the email that you sent around. I'm like, man, I haven't thought about that line in a while. It worked.
Wow,
Yeah.
that made me think. It's because you guys know I do ring announcing for MMA events, and at the last one, a guy, a friend of mine, he's sitting with these guys I don't know, and they're like, "Oh, come have a shot with us," and I come over and I go, no, bad things happen. And he goes, what do you mean bad things happen? And I said, well, we stay here till 2, 3 in the morning. I try to party with these ring girls, maybe even go home with one or two of them or whatever it is. And he's like, how is that bad? I said, because I have 2 kids and an amazing woman at home that would go away really fast. And all of my credibility. And he's like,
Yikes.
oh, and then later he goes, what do you do? And so I told him, not knowing. He's like, oh wow, man, I feel bad. I'm like, don't feel bad. I'm just a smart ass, And I said, but that's what happens. He's like, oh, okay, thanks.
So good. Right? And then when you do say something like that, right? You say the word, 6 degrees of separation, like addiction, alcoholism, like 0.5 degrees of separation. Someone always knows. Like I was waiting for Jason to say that guy. Actually, I will even say, I bet you in the future that guy goes, hey man, I need help, or someone I know needs help. I remember this guy, Jason, the ring announcer. He's sober, man. They're going to reach out to you, dude.
Yeah. It is weird that way.
Knocking Doors Down by Carlos Vieira. Now available wherever you get audiobooks.
I wasn't done partying, and I didn't want the binge to end. I think I knew that when I finally got home, I'd have to face what I had done, and I wasn't ready to do that. Being responsible for my actions wasn't something I was looking forward to. I had abandoned my wife and baby, my family, and my business. I wanted to avoid the shame of returning to what I had left behind. Even though I was not yet going home, I wasn't sure I had enough resources to continue the binge.
Click the link in the podcast description to find out more.
Michelle, I mean, this is an area you and I have talked about, and I see the struggle. The meetings I attend the most are Celebrate Recovery, so Christian-based. A lot of amazing guys. I mean, boy, gentlemen, the other day, just 5 days and that surrender and that strength and I don't remember it. I don't remember if I was that strong, but just being there in that meeting and crying and just being grateful to be there. But, you're like a theologian. You're like my friend that just explores it all. And you just have this beautiful essence and presence. And how do you, when someone kind of asks you about spirituality that's new to sobriety, really embrace them or walk them in? I mean, I don't know. Hi, Michelle, I'm Jason. I'm 5 days sober. And, I don't, here would be my story. I think there's a God, but not one that loves me. But people said that you're pretty switched on.
Yeah. I would say, you know what? It's hard to give like a tailored response to this because the way that I would navigate a situation like this is based on the person's energy and who I'm speaking with at the time. When I'm reading what they've gone through, what they've shared in the meeting, what they've told me, I can determine kind of like their past according to their voice inflections, just the things that they share, the way they stand, the way they enunciate, what they're wearing, how they're just projecting their energy towards me. So I base it upon that. But I guess overall, the thing that I was told was, Michelle, whatever seems most interesting to you, explore that. If it is Jesus, explore that. Explore his history. explore his scriptures, explore his teachings. If it is Paramahansa Yogananda and you're more into Hinduism, explore that. Look into meditation, look into samadhi, look into the Bhagavad Gita. If it is any other spiritual teacher, that something like whenever you start reading a scripture, or if you've been exposed to the Bhagavad Gita, or if you've been exposed to the Bible, and you always felt kind of pulled towards that, follow that curiosity. The collective consciousness tells us that curiosity killed the cat, right? I have learned something that Gary had said just a moment ago. Everything that we were taught about the world and in the past was completely wrong. Learn to completely set all of that aside and follow that curiosity, because the way that I feel is like my higher power leaves breadcrumbs. And it's like, hey, follow me this direction, follow me that direction. The issue is that after 25 years of alcoholism and drug addiction, that still small voice was completely covered in layers upon layers and filters upon filters that I couldn't hear that voice. So if anything, what I would say is for myself, when I came in, I had a huge resentment against my higher power and against God. So my focus was exposing myself to as many people that had been long-term sober. And I used them as a higher power and their wisdom drenched onto me. And then as I did the steps, I started to become emotionally, physically sober. And then I was able to start connecting to an authentic higher power within myself.
That's incredible. I mean, I perked up for that from that, Michelle, all of it. You know, my higher power is God. I call him God, but I have this curiosity also. Like even like I want to read the book, and I'm a little torn. Like I'll have like a little guilt if I'm like, well, I don't want to like mess with my guy, like, you know, but I'm also thinking, as I'm saying, you know, back in the, you know, when I was out there, you know, I had my foxhole prayers, you know, and like, you know, get me out of this one, you know, like I always had some relationship, I'd say, with God or a higher power, but the universe. And you just said something too, also, Michelle, that early on, you know, I don't know. when I came in, I just didn't want to drink anymore. Like that's all I was there for. And, you know, it took me a while. It was you know, you wish people a slow, long recovery. Like I get what that term means now. But I used the meeting. Someone said, don't worry about it. Like, you know, like I didn't want to walk into some like, you know, preachy God place. Like it wouldn't have worked for me at the time. And they're like, just use the meeting. The meeting's your higher power. Use whatever you need to. And I remember sitting in the meeting early on, you know, and as I'm thinking back now, like I certainly was like trying, right? I'm like, all right, the meeting's my higher power. And let me tell you, like, I felt stuff, like I felt it, like, you know, and I walked out of there, you know, and then also I love what you said about the breadcrumbs, like everything you said. I was like, oh, I want to speak to Michelle further in this, but the breadcrumbs, right? It's almost like, and I say this a lot to myself, like when I'm really on the beam, you know, God, I'm just praying for your will for me, you know, and please let me see what you're putting in front of me, you know. And I remember even, I don't want to turn, you know, pivot here, but September 11th happened, you know, and I wasn't sober at the time. And, you know, we got out, I was downtown and I happened to bump into a buddy. We ended up walking to his apartment and, you know, we're just sitting there watching the TV. And, you know, we were like, well, we got to have to head back down because we had some friends that were in some buildings down there. And I remember just saying a prayer, like, God, please let me, you know, please let me help today, you know, and totally different from that, you know, traumatizing event, but it's almost what I ask for today. Like God, and I come on right before the show. I say a quick prayer every time I do a podcast. Every time I go to a meeting, God, please let me just say one thing through me. Let me help one person here today. And Michelle, like if you had yours, like I want to follow what you were saying because I was like, whoa, just now. I thought that was so awesome.
Well, and I think it's the beauty too of the things, the spectrums that we get because, you know, that meeting last Friday, gentleman right next to me shares 5 days. And I'm sharing that I still get as the saying goes, stinking thinking, where I'm like, oh my God, this person that I'm working for, all of a sudden this chunk of money went away. And of course, I still have a catastrophic mind that it plays out quicker now because I can jump into conscious thinking from subconscious. But it was immediately, oh my God, that's a chunk of money that's going away the whole year. finances are going to get real bad. That means that my partner's going to leave me and my kids aren't going to talk to me, and I went right down that road. And granted, that lasted about 7 seconds. I stayed on the bull, so to speak. And that was my share right after this gentleman just said 5 days and I'm grateful to be here. And that's all he had. And it's that irony of like, wow, thank you, sir, because my problems, that quick thing, it ain't shit. And, I've done more with less. And I don't know what God has. Maybe this is the opening up something different and better for me. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I'm waiting for those breadcrumbs. But I want to be conscious of what is coming in front of me, because we all, not only in addiction, but just in society and life in general, do so much subconscious living. Gary, you and I, homes of addiction. We hated what we saw. But what do? We went right out and did the same shit.
Yep. Good.
Jason, I'm sorry, Gary, you want to go ahead?
No, please, you go.
Thank you. So Jason said something that really stuck out to me was, I want to remain conscious of those breadcrumbs. And what I thought about is a quote that says, what we truly have is a daily reprieve that's contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And so a daily reprieve is basically means to postpone the punishment. Reprieve means to postpone the punishment. So postpone the punishment of what? Of the ego. What is the ego comprised of? Our character defect. So every single day, it's our responsibility to stay in spiritual fit condition and not allow ourselves to accumulate these character defects. Because if I am throwing my resentments and my fears in this proverbial backpack, every single day they start to stack up and stack up and stack up. And eventually I'm not going to be able to hear my higher power. I'm not going to be able to notice those breadcrumbs in my everyday life. But I have to stay spiritually fit every day and try to remain vigilant every single second of the day.
That's amazing, because I've heard that, and then I practice it, right? It's just a daily reprieve. I'll even say it's just a daily reprieve, but you just explained it, and you gave it such an amazing definition of what that daily reprieve really is, right? And it's just for today. Jason, also, thank you for saying what you said too, because I go down the rabbit hole. We're moving, and there's a lot of stress with moving. It's just a lot of stuff. But Jason, ditto, like across the board. This customer is going to go, and this is going to happen, and my kids, we're all going to be out on the street, and this whole move is an awful idea, and everyone's going to leave me, and they're not going to be fed, and it's crazy. And I think the more sort of stress that I know, they say, moving is a really big stressful event, and I guess it's true, but I've been really kind of going down those rabbit holes. So I appreciate you sharing that for sure. It's reading another book too, actually. We read a bunch of books. Michelle, you mentioned the defects of character. In the big book, steps 6 and 7 are so quick. Again, the first time through, I'm like, all right, cool, 6 and 7 are done. Let's get on to 8. But really, then you start really dissecting and looking into yourself, right? And there's whole books called Drop the Rock, and I forget, the Ripple Effect is the other one. It's all about our defects of character and the things that need to be addressed, right? And I'm with a Monday night group. It started in the pandemic. Like, we got to do something. We're like, let's read the big book on Monday night. So we did that, and then we evolved and we read Drop the Rock. After Drop the Rock, which is about our defects of character, we're all like, let's just read it again. We ran it right back, and we read that again. It's because it resonated so much with each and every one of us. There's only I think 8 of us, about our defects of character. What was the other thing? I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. But really, it's like what we work on every day. And that's the other book we're reading now. Is called, maybe you've heard of it. It's what's it called? Sorry, it's called the Untethered Soul. And it's about, I don't know if you guys have read it, but it's really about the voices. It's about this inner roommate in ourselves, right? And it's telling us all those anxious thoughts, or telling us that we suck, or telling us that we're not good, or giving those financial fears. And it's got this exercise, and I've really been practicing it, and it's really, really been working. It's just like you don't have to go with those thoughts. Like, thoughts come, right, Jason? Like you're saying, it's like, and then we go with them and we go down that rabbit hole. It's just like, be aware of that thought and let it just go, and you don't have to go with it, and then it comes back to one of my favorite sayings, and I say it all the time to myself a lot, especially last week, like I said, is you can't live in faith and fear at the same time. You can't eat both. So let's tell ourselves a good story. You don't have to always tell ourselves the bad story. Or if we hear it, you don't have to go with that bad story. Tell yourself a good story.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a shifting of vigilance, right? We were so vigilant of the world out and around us, and our ability to seek or connect with, like-minded people, our shifting of like-minded people, right? It's changed a lot, thank goodness. Sure. But I think we started to become vigilant of self, right? Like it took, it was a quick story, played out about 7 seconds, but I was very aware of it, and it did take a little bit of that time. I know 7 seconds sounds quick maybe, but it's really not if you get into a spiral, right? How much is like 2 seconds? Let us both back out to, you know what? I'm not going to drink tonight. 2-second thought, 2 hours later, you're half a bottle in, whatever it is. So I think it's that shifting of vigilance of self that I came into that awareness of, wow, it's not the world that's doing me harm. It's the stories that I'm connected to about myself and how I go out in the world. I am my greatest enemy, is when I finally came to that conclusion and accepted, and it took a while because I'm thick-headed, and I had an amazing sponsor. It was like, it literally, it almost played out. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie with Michael Keaton, Clean and Sober, where he's sitting with the gentleman that becomes his sponsor, and he's asking him, Daryl, are you an alcoholic, Daryl? And I kept throwing out all this shit. And my sponsor at the time, he just kept going, Jason, are you an alcoholic? And I was like, what does that have to do with this feeling and that? And Jason, are you an alcoholic? And finally it's like, yeah, I am. Yeah. And it was like, oh, wow. And then it was the first opening to myself, to the person that needed to do the work, that everything that my life had been and was drawing in, it had to do with me. And it was the first steps of freeing the things that happened in childhood, and not that they weren't bad, and that, but really detaching, like I spoke at a high school about a month and a half ago, and I'm sharing stories and the childhood trauma, and this young lady goes, well, thank you for your courage. And I'm like, well, it just doesn't sit in my body anymore. She goes, huh? And I'm like, well, I don't get an emotional response anymore from the things that happen. And those things that happen, when they come back up in my head, that's what I wanted to avoid as quick as possible. And the easiest way to do that was to go pick up another drink or text a different girl or whatever it was. And so I think it's part of that process of taking a look at, like, how are we a harm to ourselves?
My gosh, there's just so much amazing insight that you guys are providing here, and I'm just so grateful to be spending time with you. One of the things that really stood out to me that Jason just said was the vigilance of self. When I came in to sobriety at the age of 39, I had been using for 25 years, and so I was so fried. My body was riddled with diseases. I was 300 pounds, fibromyalgia, pancreatitis, pulmonary embolisms. My skin was gray. I was temporarily in a wheelchair. I had temporarily lost the ability to speak for various reasons. But the bottom line is, like, the vigilance of self was completely gone. I hadn't done that in 25 years. I didn't know what that meant. And what I realized the other day, at least in my current state of consciousness, is that the 12th step talks about a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. An awakening is merely just being conscious, being awake, being able to perceive what's happening in this perpetual now moment. So when Jason says, like, I started going down this stinking thinking, or Gary said down this rabbit hole, it's like, it can feel like an eternity for us, for it to be 2 seconds, for it to be 7 seconds. But the fact that we have emotionally detoxed and spiritually detoxed in step 4 and talked to someone about it and offered it to our higher power, surrendered, and he removes those character defects, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, right? Then, over time, we can start to pinpoint when we start going off the beam. And whenever we're just experiencing those 2 to 7 seconds of discomfort or stinking thinking, we can say, oh, it's not somebody outside of me that's doing this. It's me. So then on page 417, it says something. Let me see if I have it right here. I just wanted to refer to it. It says, when I'm disturbed, it is because I find some place, person, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it's supposed to be in this moment. So it's a gift, truly, when we feel those ugly thoughts, when we start going down that rabbit hole, because it's kind of like a stop sign that's blaring in front of us that says, stop, you're going down the wrong path. I know, Jason, it might just be 7 seconds, but you know what to do to get back on it. So let's go do that.
Yeah. I heard that. I forget what I was watching the other night. Oh, I think it was the Daredevil TV show. I love comic books. One of my favorites. And there's a part where the main character, Matt, he's sitting, he's talking to the priest, it's his advisor, and he's talking about guilt. And he said, guilt is the, I'm going to probably butcher this a little bit. It's the soul's way. Guilt and shame are the soul's way of telling you that your work is not done. And it was like, oh, yeah, I don't know if the camera's picking up chills just thinking about it. Such a great scene. And it's like, and I think that's such an interesting part of how it ties into what you're saying, Michelle, because oftentimes, right, when we're in that spiral thing, what was I feeling? I was feeling shameful and less than that this work that really not of my control. I did everything I was asked to do. They just changed their mind. Like they just decided to end the project. How does that rest on me? I attached it to me because of my ego, like you're saying. Oh, Mr. Big Fuck Ego, here you go. This whole thing that happened is because of you. No, you did your job. This is how it played out. You have to hold no guilt or shame. Like I don't have to hang my head to let my partner know, hey, finances are going to change on my end. Here's the result. Hey kids, you're going to have to tighten up a little bit more the Friday lunches after school because eating out is crazy expensive. It can't happen as frequent, but don't worry. I'll get something figured out and we'll get back to it when we can. And that's pretty easy. But my story was everyone's going to reject me. I'm going to be right back to that person that's sitting there alone in a room.
So true. That 7 seconds we keep going back to, like sometimes it's more than 7, right? We let it take us, right? We let it take us. I've learned recently, you hear so much stuff, right? We just hear so much. And when you have an open mind, you like want to learn, like we all, at least me, I'm always like want to learn. But, someone said the other day, like nobody talks as bad to myself as I do. And I was like, oh man. And then Jason, you just said, apparently, about shame and guilt. My first thing is, oh man, I got a lot of work to do then. I think there's a lot more left of work to do. But, it's awareness. I think what Michelle was saying too, at least for me, I'm aware of it. Like I can actually take a step back from Gary. And by the way, let me just one preface too. Like when I came in, I was the only person in that room without an ego. Everyone's talking about ego. I was like, I don't have an ego. I don't have an ego. And I'm like, all right, just sit down. Then
keep coming back.
Yeah. And then I had, step 4 was like, a binder. So, but, even that, I was such a slow learner. But yeah, even what you're saying too, Jason, stuff we've been through, childhood trauma or stuff I saw as a kid. And you said it before, right? Like I hated cocaine growing up. I hated it because I saw it so much, and I always had this chip on my shoulder, which is ego. That's an ego from a young kid, but this chip on my shoulder just kept growing and growing and growing. And I acted out because of it and I numbed because of it. And I was never going to go near that stuff. And if you saw like my crew, I was like the last one to get there, to get to the cocaine, and then, but once I found it, like they were like, oh my God, like it was like, get out of the way. Even listen, they're no angels. Like they were trying to hide it from me because I would just be like, let's go, and then I would sober up and I'd be like, I'm never doing that stuff. Like, I didn't have the guy's number, but then I have a beer, right, guys? And I'd be like, call him right now. And, just, I say all that stuff, right? And it's all about beating ourselves up. And it's all about ego. And I laugh, I laughed because, like I said, I was the only person in the room without an ego, but to have this awareness, right? And to have this, and it is a process, right? And sometimes I feel like I put a little too much on my spouse. I'm like, you know what? If she's okay, I just need her to be okay. Like Jason, when you're saying, hey, we're gonna, need to cut back. I totally get that stuff, and I get fearful. Like, I don't want to have that conversation. It's uncomfortable because I feel less than, I don't want to let anybody down. And anyway, all I have to do is just say, like you said, it's easy. All I do is have the conversation, but sometimes it takes so much, fear and anxiety and beating myself up to getting to that point. Then I have this really one simple conversation and I step back. I'm like, wow, I should have done that yesterday. I should have done that yesterday. I would have saved myself 24 hours of misery. Let me get this.
Sure.
My
gosh.
Michelle?
Yeah. So I wanted to comment on something that Gary had said, but I didn't want to do it without him on, with the ears on.
Thank you.
We know how you were saying that you just start beating yourself up and you're like, man, I should have done that yesterday. It kind of ties into what you were talking about, the tethered soul. Although I've never read the book, I was catapulted back into a memory of listening to a lecture the other day. And it was talking about the need for us to completely eradicate the ego. And they were talking about our character defects. And then the speaker said, imagine this, a genie in a bottle. The genie in the bottle is your consciousness. The bottle that is encapsulating the consciousness is your character defect. When you identify your character defect from the your intellectual mind, your emotional and your instinctual mind, and you go into meditation, you go into prayer, and you ask God to remove that character defect, that essentially will shatter their bottle, and your consciousness will be able to be untethered. It will be able to escape. So if you notice people that are truly working these steps, working on mindfulness, awareness, self-reflection, doing meditation and doing prayer, they have more light. And it's because, at least from my perspective, that more consciousness has been able to escape from that trap of the character defect. So the whole thing that I'm working on in this lifetime is to try to eradicate as many of those character defects so that the entire consciousness can be revealed, not in just fragments like it is right now, but in its entirety, but not for me in an egoic manner, but so that I could be of service to my higher power in the whichever way he sees fit.
Have you dug into the archives of past Knocking Doors Down podcast episodes? The Knocking Doors Down podcast archive is available to you for free. Check it out. Here's a snippet from when Charlie Sheen was on the podcast.
AA is not the best place for a famous atheist. I kept looking for that fucking chapter. So yeah, but it's not a one size fits all. Sure. It's like saying that we all think the same, like our brains are built the same. They're just not.
Right. Yeah.
There's such uniqueness involved.
Check out this episode and so many more in the Knocking Doors Down archive. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumb up, leave a comment, and share with somebody else that you know will get value out of the Knocking Doors Down podcast.
There you go. Service to your higher power, right? Like that, to me, when you say that, that's for me. When I'm on the beam, I'm in conscious contact with my higher power. I think I'm a little slower. I think I'm not as fast to everything. It's like the untethered soul. Jason, you'll laugh. It's telling me that I don't have to live in fear anymore. Like you can have a life where you don't live in fear. And I'm like, man, am I ever going to get to this like Gary Jedi Master type stage where I'm taking everything in, I'm watching, I'm aware of everything. And I laugh, but I'm like, I think I could maybe get there. Like I need to do a lot of practice. And Jason knows Jedi Master is like, so that's really my universe, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love it. But, I want to bring up one other thing about kind of what we're talking about, egos. And it was this woman brought up, I was on another woman's podcast, not a strictly sober podcast, but just sort of like life transformation. She was really so cool. She brought this exercise up with me, and she said, I have this picture of my younger self, like 5-year-old self, that I keep out like front and center. And whenever I'm in a bad spot, I look at that little girl, or for me, like, I look at that little girl and say, hey, it's going to be okay. Doing great. It's going to be okay. And I'm like, I need to go get a picture of younger Gary, because I can picture myself, staring at when things started to really, because I know when things started to turn, at least in my mind, emotionally, right? And I'm sure we all can touch upon that. Like when things started to go a little sideways in our lives, probably most of us when we were pretty young, right? But man, I would love to be able to do that exercise and stare at that little, young boy, and say, hey, you know what, Gary? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're doing great. And by the way, look how far you've come, and keep going, man. Like that little exercise, I think it kind of, right? Because that little child of us, maybe we weren't filled with those. We didn't have those fears yet. Or we didn't know about them. We didn't have our egos just yet. They were getting developed, right? Stuff was going to come our way, and we were going to figure out how to survive, right? It's all survival mechanisms, right? And like I mentioned, growing the chips on our shoulders or what have you. It's all part of survival, right? You feel less than, you're going to figure out how to puff out your chest or whatever it may be, or maybe you're going to act out, or, I'm not, that guy, I'm not strong enough or whatever. What am I going to do? I'm going to go into a fight, it's just stupid stuff again, but all part of our journeys, I guess. And I did want to bring that up. I thought it was so profound and it really hit me. So I wanted to share it with you too.
No, thank you. And I think it's kind of like we've been talking, is it's a shifting our way of being, right? I mean, we go through so much different program. We go, I'm watching, I was thinking back to like high school and things that I thrived in and getting an award or an accolation or whatever it is. And so, it's that stimuli, like, oh, this is achievement. This is it. This is doing this. This is being good. This is prospering, or what we get, we go through, we get subjective grades from people throughout it. I have a college degree, Gary. I think you do too. Michelle, I don't recollect. No, you don't. Okay. So all this stuff. So I got this degree from all these different people through all these years, everything from an A to an F. And I hung what on it? Like, granted, I have a film and television degree. I'm qualified to say, would you like fries with that? I joke now with my mom that, hey, I finally started using everything I learned and then some. It's just a weird way of being, right? Like, we're looking so external of all these things, validate me or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with hard work hard in school. I'm not saying that if there's any young people listening. Yeah, work hard, go after your goals. But it's such a weird way of being. And it played very much into, okay, well, I'm out and about, so there's 5 really hot girls here. Well, at least one of them better talk to me at the bar at night. And it's that same kind of stupid validation, like, what the fuck? Really? Like, how does that matter in the grand scheme of life fulfillment? 0. I don't know.
Yeah, all of those external things is something that truly needs to be looked at. At least that's what I was guided to do at the very beginning of my sobriety. It's like I was taught that I needed to look at the intention of everything that I do, from why am I sending Jason a text message today or a DM, or why am I sending my mom a text, or why am I calling my dad? Why am I sending this email? Why am I going to say this? Why am I going to do that? Why am I thinking this or that? Why am I going to get this degree? Why am I going to date this person? Is it because I want a nice house? Is it why I want a nice car? Why am I going to marry this guy? Why am I going to go out and date with this person? Is it being driven by lust or true connection? Why am I going to buy this food? Is it because of gluttony, or is it because I want to nourish my body? Why am I going to drink this drink? Is it because I want to tap out of life and not face my fears and my emotions? Or is it because of something else? Is it out of habit? All of these things, like in my sobriety, I needed to take a look at the intention behind everything that I did. I truly found, and this wasn't intentional at the beginning, but when I'm looking back, what I did was I detoxed all of my 5 senses. And a couple of months ago, I had someone reach out to me from a nonprofit organization called Breathe and Rise Collective. And they said, hey, Michelle, are you willing to teach about how to reprogram your subconscious mind? And I sat back, and they were at a different location, and I was at home, and I was like, I don't know how to do that. And then I started to truly reflect on my past, and I was like, okay, I do know how to do that. Learning to detox like all of the emotions and reprogramming ourselves with new ways of perceiving, new sight, new hearing, new ways of speaking, new ways of expressing ourselves, clearing all of our intentions and having more of a purified heart and way of living changes everything. But the thing is, like, and I've told Jason in previous podcasts, it's like I got sober and I said to myself, there's only one thing that needs to change, and that's everything.
I'm going to have to get with you on the detox and the senses. Now I'm highly fascinated. You've never mentioned this to me. This is all new.
Yeah. So since the last time that we spoke, Jason, I had only written the script for the first episode. And so now there's 3 episodes that are live on Patreon. And the cool thing is that I truly love about this, because I'm not the type of person that thinks that it's okay to charge for the things that I've learned in my sobriety. I don't think it's okay to be charging for things that have been freely given to me, right? For the wisdom that I've attained because of God's grace. And so this nonprofit organization, yes, you can sign up for memberships and donate, $3 a month, $12 a month, or $21 a month. But if you don't have that and you sign up for free with your email, you'll have access to my videos. And it's not just me, it's other things as well. But yeah, I can give that to you guys in a little bit.
Yeah.
Give it to, of course, to share it with whoever's listening here, because it is, it's imperative that we shift everything when we get sober. It's not just about stopping the drinking. As Gary was saying, he thought that it was going to be, or that's all that he wanted. And for me, I just wanted the suffering to stop. But it's like, okay, well, once the obsession to drink is gone, then what? Well, I can guide you and tell you exactly what needs to be done. And then I can support that with, evidentiary support from the scriptures, whether that's from Jesus or Hinduism or Buddhism, because I've studied all 3.
That's so cool. I mean, I was picking up that too, the detox of the 5 senses. I was like, whoa. I was like, I want more about this too, Jason. It's, wow, what an incredible thing. I struggle with the same thing too, like as far as, earning money in some of this stuff, which I don't. But there's also a part of me that, and I think actually Mike Diamond posted something. So you mentioned like hard work, like you look at the map, like I have my dreams are completely different from where they were, right? Back in the day. Now I just kind of want to cover that map with the 4 of us, right? Part of that is me. I want to go see this whole country, right? But I want to take them with me. What's more fun than that? And I think that's a healthy, sort of beautiful goal, to want to do that. And I got I got the pins and I'm plugging them up. But you had said too, you just said something, and I said it this morning too. When I came in, they said in the book, it says, the obsession to drink will be lifted. I was calling BS. I was like, you don't know me. I was like, that's never going to happen. Like I will sit here and I'll white knuckle it and I'll hold on. I don't want to live the way I was. But I still was just such, maybe because of my upbringing, I was such a skeptical, cynical, like I didn't trust anybody, like say it often, like some guy comes and, hey man, like what you said, or I'm glad you're here. Here's my number. Like, here's your number. Call me. Like every instinct in my body is like, dude, go give that to someone else. Right. Like, I don't know why you see me. I'm not calling you, but it wasn't until it shifted, everything flipped. And I was given the gift of surrender. And I said, you know what? I don't know anything. This guy's telling me to call him. Yes, my instincts are saying go the other way, but he's sober. I'm going to call him tomorrow. And it was so blatant, like, all right, you told me to call you. All right, we good? Yeah, how you doing? I'm good. All right, call me tomorrow. And it was so slow. And it dawned on me, though, like probably after a year, I said, oh my God, the obsession to drink has been lifted, because it was such an obsession for most of my adult life that just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Once I started, I couldn't stop, like I really couldn't stop. I was the I'm sure you can all relate, like, all right, I'm just going to go out for one tonight, and, I wouldn't come home, and I just do that every single night, and those foxhole prayers, as, God, get me out of this one. I'll never do this again. I do it the very next night. And let me tell you, that's a fair way to beat yourself up and not feel good about yourself. You're a fraud. Look at you. You're a disaster. Like all that muscle memory, it takes a while to evolve and to get better. But like we were saying earlier, I'm aware of it now, and I've said this too, and I've heard people on social media, say, I'm a grateful alcoholic. Like I was the one, like, really? Listen, I know we're here. Okay. But don't tell me, please stop, But now, man, I am about as grateful an alcoholic as you can possibly meet, because this didn't happen to me. If I didn't do the things I did to myself, wasn't given that gift of surrender, that courage to ask for help, like I would not be where I am. I would not be on this journey of really beautiful self-discovery and having a conversation with you guys to learn more about myself. Like we're going to stop this, and I'm going to be looking into you more, Michelle. Like I want to learn more. Right. And Jason, you're constant. I'm always looking at your stuff. Like just, we're all we're three people, not a bunch, three people, trying to get better every single day. And, Michelle, we all, in our own ways, I think we do service to help people, right? Like we're all saying a prayer. Hey, let me help one person today. Like I know us, we do of one way or another. What a beautiful way, right? And if the trickle down effect is, maybe that person will do it. Maybe that person helps, and one day we'll all be in a really good place.
Yeah. You're such a New Yorker. What guy giving me your number? Get the hell out of here. But now for me, it's interesting when you talk about that, it will be lifted, is all I remember anymore is the suffering. Like it's immediate, like a thought of having the alcohol or a drug enter my body. I only remember the suffering. And I don't know. I know some people, like when I've shared that, like, oh, brother, it's okay. You can pray and have that taken from you. I'm like, I don't want it taken from me. I like to remember the suffering. I don't beat myself up over the suffering. For me, it's a really good, quick reminder of how bad it could go if I were to make a very disempowering decision. Like, yeah, the cravings are gone, but I don't ever want to lose the suffering. I can remember those feelings. And I think it's important for me in my continued recovery and sobriety to keep it close. Like I can step back into some of those feelings really quick, but when I do it, I don't beat myself up. It's just like, oh my God, I know exactly what that feeling is. I don't know if it's the actor training or whatever BS, but it's like, I can step right back into it. It can hit on my face if I want it to. Like I know that feeling, and just the inkling of it is more than enough that helps that correction.
Absolutely.
I love that we have those memories. I truly love that we have those memories and those flashbacks every once in a while, because I what I've noticed is the longer and longer I stay sober, things start to be uncovered, and it's not necessarily tied to like one thing or another. I could be out hiking at the trail, and suddenly I will have a flashback of something that occurred like 10 years ago or something like that. And for me, I'm in the same boat, Jason, and I'm sure Gary too. It's like being able to see those things is truly a good thing. It's not something that I have an aversion to, in a sense. Being able to still feel like that twinge, like in my chest, of like what it feels like to relapse or to take that drink or to shoot up or whatever it is, to have that feeling, that feeling of like how gross it feels, is so good. Because I remember, I think I came in and out of the rooms for like 5 years before I stayed put. And I would relapse and relapse and relapse. And anytime that I would attain any type of clarity of mind, and then I would relapse and go, even if it was just taking one pill or just one drink, suddenly it like something was just like sitting on the top of my shoulders, pushing me down into the ground. And I felt like this fog that just, I could not do anything about. I could not release it. The only thing that was going to release it was time, the steps, and my higher power. I don't want to go back to that place again.
I love that. I think we all do it a different way. I say a lot, like, don't forget where you came from, right? I think that's little different way of saying some of the stuff we're saying. Michelle, you articulated way better than I ever could. But I just sometimes I love to hike too, Michelle. I love it. Like that's sort of that's my serene place. That's where, it's also kind of my meditation. I love just being in nature, sweating, some endorphins going. I feel my best. Everything's going to be okay when I'm there. But yeah, don't forget where you come from, where I came from. Don't forget where I was. And that could mean when I was like that little boy we were talking about earlier, or it could mean where I was 18 years ago. That again, the obsession to lift, yes, it's really even to say it, but I'll have these moments too. Like I think we're both talking about, three of us are talking about of, you get zapped back right where you were. Talk about, I'm thinking about too of drunk dreams. I remember I used to have them all the time, like all the time. Right. And they're so real. They are so real. I felt it in my heart, my soul. And I'd slowly wake up and be like, wait a minute, it didn't happen. Oh my God, I'm still sober. Like really, that would happen especially early on. Like, and those feelings of you're such a loser, Gary. You did it again. Like, to wake up to like, oh God, I'm not, like to really have those dreams. You're not there anymore. I haven't had one of those in so long, but they were so powerful. Like they might as well have almost been real because the feeling was so real. And again, we say it all the time. Like it happens to me a lot in meetings too. I go to a 6 a.m. here and just really bring me back to where I was. And I try to it's almost like the basics, like Gary, like just keep everything in perspective, proper perspective, and keep the basics. Like, you know what? Like we were talking about before going down the rabbit hole, you know what, Gary? You're here. You're alive. You're a sober man. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Tap into that higher power. Maybe call someone, see how they're doing, right? When you always shift it, that's what we're taught in the book too. Like, call another alcoholic, check in, take the thoughts, take the energy off of yourself and try to give it to somebody else. Next thing you know, hey, I haven't thought about Gary in about 20 minutes, man. That's I was feeling pretty good then, and then you're back into the Gary mode. But, there's real, beautiful lessons in that. When you just, if you're in a bad spot, call somebody else. I used to have the guys just sit there and just, as soon as he started feeling something, he just call someone. I got a lot of those calls too. And now I get to do that too. It's, again, take the thought and the effort off yourself and put it to someone else that maybe can use it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we're going to have to do this again real soon.
Yes,
I'm in.
I agree.
This is great.
Anytime.
And heck, now that both of you brought him up, now I feel bad. We should have invited Flint Anderson, but hey, we'll do that on the next one.
Awesome.
Gary, people want to check out the Begin Again podcast, more on you. Where do they go? What do they do?
Instagram, the Begin Again podcast is the handle. My website is thebeginagainpodcast.com. DM me. I'm there. I'm on Facebook too, but I spend most of my time, I guess, on Instagram. But yeah, right. Please DM me. Nothing makes me feel better when I talk to a complete stranger about being sober.
Yeah. Michelle, my friend, what about yourself?
I do spend most of my time on Instagram, just as Gary, but I am on TikTok and Facebook. Well, primarily I am on YouTube and Instagram. Let's just say that. But if you are interested in reprogramming your subconscious mind, the title of the series that I'm teaching on Patreon is called Unraveling the Matrix of the Mind. So far, I have 3 episodes on there. You can sign up for free with your email. What you're going to look for is Breathe and Rise Collective. So I will give that to Jason so he could put in the show notes.
It will be in the show notes. What note do we want to leave on here, guys?
A positive note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, may I share what I'm thinking?
Share.
If anyone is new to sobriety and to the 12-step rooms, I would say don't hesitate to do the 4th step. The 4th step is basically where you're looking at your resentments and your fears and your sexual misconduct, any type of traumas and anything like that. No matter what anybody says in the rooms, don't allow their experience, bad experiences that they may have or anything like that, to prevent you from doing a 4th step. A fourth step essentially is like an emotional and a spiritual detox. And after I was done, I felt so much freer. I felt so much lighter. I felt so much better because the honesty that I was able to cultivate from doing the first three steps and sharing with my sponsor was able to carry me forward through the rest of the steps. And it continues to be a main component of my spiritual practice.
Gary.
That's incredible. I'm actually going to piggyback on that because, again, I can't articulate it nearly like you can so beautifully, but it took me so long to do the fourth step. I was so afraid of sharing this stuff with somebody else. I was so afraid of writing this stuff down. Some of the stuff I never told anyone ever, my whole entire life, right? Stuff I saw, stuff that happened. And I was terrified. And I can remember it clear as day doing my first fourth step right now. And it was an apartment in the Upper West Side, a small little apartment, my sponsor's studio apartment. It had candles, and I walked in there, and that New Yorker in me was like, I knew it. Here we go. Candles. Yeah, something's going to happen now. But I was wrong, just like everything else I said. I thought, I was wrong about everything I thought. But when I shared that fourth step with him, I was honestly immediately lighter. I was immediately free of all of it. It really was. It's not BS. I walked out of that place a lighter person. And some of those deep, dark that I would never share with anybody, I share on a podcast now. And so it's completely life-changing for me. I think I wish I went first because you speak so much better than I do.
I know.
What a perfect, I couldn't think of a better thing to say. Step 4 changed my life for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like to leave with, no matter where you're at in your recovery, and we all, we're all going to have life struggles. This is this human experience, right? But there truly are so many. Yeah, Walt Whitman, be curious, not judgmental. Step into these different things, try them out, see what works for you, because you truly can unlock from yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all this shit that sits on you. There is a way. There's a way. Gary, it's a little bit different for you than me. Michelle, a little bit different from you than me. But this is what I love. I get to learn from amazing people like you and try it out. Like if it doesn't work, okay, I heard what Bob said. I'm gonna go try what Bob recommended, and that might help. I don't know. But be curious in your recovery. We used to experiment with chemicals. Now experiment with this beautiful process. Try them out.
Follow the curiosity.
Oh yeah. I didn't land on Christianity right away. I was like, oh, I went to Catholic school. That was effing miserable. I don't want to do that. Nobody answers my questions. And I went exploring. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, all my questions are being answered or new questions are coming up. Just keep going with it, So yeah, I'll leave on that. And I love you guys and I appreciate you. Thank you for doing this.
I love you guys too.
You're welcome.
This has been really great. I love this. Thanks again for the invite. I'll do this anytime you want with you too, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a deal. On that note, remember, no outside solutions to inside problems and keep knocking doors down.